to the Kids Corner Channel 1 News. I'm Dan.
And I'm Brittany with the latest reporting on the Bible.
Last week, we took a closer look at Abraham's great-grandson Joseph and how God protected the Israelites through him. Joseph and all of his brothers and all that generation of Israelites died, but the Israelites' families kept growing and getting bigger and bigger. The Israelites grew so big that they filled the land.
And over time, the king of Egypt forgot all about Joseph and what he had done to save the Egyptians. The new king no longer cared about the Israelites, and he became afraid that they would take over Egypt. So he began treating them like slaves, and the Egyptians made the Israelites work all the time.
But that didn't stop God from blessing the Israelites, and they continued to grow bigger and bigger. Let's go now to hear how God is going to help his people. After the Israelites had been in Egypt for many years, there was a new Pharaoh. The new Pharaoh didn't know about the wonderful things Joseph had done for Egypt. By now, there were many people in Jacob's family. The new Pharaoh was afraid of them, so he made them work as slaves. But the harder the Israelites worked, the bigger their families grew. So Pharaoh gave the order to throw every Hebrew baby boy into the Nile River. Now, there was a woman who gave birth to a baby boy. For 3 months she hid him. When she could no longer hide him, she put him in a basket made of grass and put him in the Nile River. She prayed to God to take care of her baby. God helped the baby boy. He sent his sister to watch over him, and she picked a good hiding spot to make sure that her baby brother was safe. Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket floating down the river. She rescued the baby and named him Moses, and she decided to raise him as her very own son. When Moses' sister saw that he had been rescued by Pharaoh's daughter, she offered to find a Hebrew woman to help raise the baby. The princess agreed she would need help, so Moses' sister went to find her mom. Baby Moses was allowed to stay with his mom until he was 3 years old. After Moses had grown up, he saw how badly his people were treated. One day, Moses saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Moses was full of anger, and he killed the soldier. Pharaoh found out and tried to kill Moses, so he ran away. For many years, Moses worked as a shepherd, but the Israelites were still suffering, and they cried out to God. God heard their cries, and he had a plan to save them. One day, as Moses was watching over his flock, he saw something strange. A bush was on fire, but it was not being burned up or consumed. God called to Moses from the burning bush. God told Moses, "I have seen how my people are suffering in Egypt. Go back to Pharaoh and lead my people out of Egypt." But Moses was afraid and worried. He wondered, why would a king listen to him? What if Pharaoh wouldn't believe that God had sent him? But Moses didn't need to worry. God planned to do many miracles through Moses, so Pharaoh would set the Israelites free. After God called Moses to lead his people out of Egypt, Moses and his brother Aaron went to Pharaoh. They said, "This is what the God of Israel says. Let my people go, so they may worship me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh did not listen. So God told Moses to throw his staff to the ground, and it turned into a snake. Seeing God's power did not change his mind. Pharaoh's heart was hard. He was not going to listen to Moses. God sent 10 plagues to judge Egypt and show he was the one and only true God. Before the first plague, Moses and Aaron asked again for Pharaoh to let God's people go. They warned Pharaoh, if he did not listen this time, God will turn all the waters of the Nile to blood. But the Pharaoh would not let God's people go. So God sent the first plague on Egypt. When Pharaoh saw he could not fix the water, he agreed to let God's people go. But as soon as God took the plague away, Pharaoh changed his mind. So God sent the second plague, frogs. All over the land of Egypt was covered in frogs. Houses, cooking bowls, there were frogs everywhere. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a third plague on the land of Egypt. Lice and gnats swarmed Egypt, bothering the people and animals. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a fourth plague on the land of Egypt. This time, flies filled the land, homes, and fields. Everywhere you went, flies were in everything, but not the Israelites. The flies did not go near God's people. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a fifth plague on the land of Egypt. Now, all of the livestock became ill and started to die. The cows, donkeys, camels, sheep, goats, all of them. But none of the Israelites' livestock got sick. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a sixth plague on the land of Egypt. This time, all of the Egyptian people became sick with unhealable boils. The boils were red, itchy bumps that spread all over their bodies. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a seventh plague on the land of Egypt. This time, a horrible storm of hail, lightning, thunder went through the land, destroying everything in its path. Some of the Egyptians listened to God's warning and brought their families and animals inside, like the Israelites, and they were saved. Maybe this time Pharaoh would listen. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. Pharaoh did not allow the Israelites to be free. God sent an eighth plague on Egypt, and this time locusts filled the land, eating all of the Egyptians' food. Now the Egyptians begged Pharaoh to listen and let God's people be free. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God sent a ninth plague on the land of Egypt. Moses stretched his hands to the sky, and God brought darkness to cover Egypt. For 3 whole days, the Egyptians' houses were covered in darkness, but the Israelites' houses had light. Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh again. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. God had sent Pharaoh 9 warnings, but still, Pharaoh would not let the Israelites go. Then God said to Moses, "I will bring one more plague, the most terrible one of all, and after that, Pharaoh will let my people go." Moses went to Pharaoh and told him exactly what would happen. At midnight, God will go through Egypt, and every firstborn boy in the land of Egypt will die, including Pharaoh's firstborn son, and even the firstborn livestock will die. Moses warned Pharaoh there will be a great sadness throughout Egypt, but none of the Israelites will be harmed. Still, Pharaoh did not listen to the warning. God told the Israelites to get ready for a long journey and to cover their doorposts with the blood of a lamb so that God's people would not be harmed. The Israelites listened to God and prepared to travel. At midnight, God struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt, and Pharaoh's own son died. And everyone knew the great power of God. Pharaoh ordered the Israelites to take the flocks and herds and leave. The Egyptians even gave the Israelites silver and gold and clothing as gifts as they left. The Israelites had been slaves for 430 years in the land of Egypt, and they were finally free. The Lord led the Israelites toward the Red Sea. During the day, God led the Israelites by a pillar of cloud, and at night, He led them by a pillar of fire to give them light. Once again, Pharaoh changed his mind and became angry. He realized that he had let his slaves go, and he was not happy. He decided to chase the Israelites down and kill them. Moses led the Israelites to the Red Sea. They looked like they were trapped. The Red Sea in front of them and the Egyptian army charging in behind them. God said, "Do not be afraid." Moses held out his hand over the sea, and the sea parted so the Israelites could walk across on dry ground. When Pharaoh reached the edge of the water, he ordered his army to follow after the Israelites. When Moses and God's people had reached the other side safely, Moses raised his hand again, and the flood of water washed over the Egyptian army. God called Moses to be his servant. He was a great servant who obeyed God and led the Israelites out of slavery. The Israelites were safe, and they thanked God for saving them.
What an incredible journey! God took care of Moses and the Israelites, and He performed many miracles to protect His people.
God is always there to watch over us and guide us, just like He was with Moses and the Israelites.
Moses and the Israelites, they must have been scared some of the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the plagues that God sent to Pharaoh was actually the plague of frogs.
Ooh.
There were frogs everywhere. I mean, frogs in beds, frogs on bread, even frogs on heads.
Ah! Dan.
I thought that was funny.
There were 10 plagues on Egypt, and they were sent to convince the Pharaoh and all the Egyptians that the God of the Israelites was the one and only real God. See, the Egyptians believed in many false gods and goddesses, and 10 times God gave them the chance to turn away from the false gods to believe in Him.
The Pharaoh also even believed that he was a god.
Yeah, the Pharaoh refused to turn away from his own pride and his selfish desires to be in control.
Well, up next, we have Ruby sharing a fun way to remember the story of baby Moses.
Hi kids, and thank you for joining us for online church. We are going to sing a song together. It goes like this. Where is baby Moses? Moses, Moses, where is baby Moses on the river Nile? He's floating in a basket, a basket, a basket. He's floating in a basket on the river Nile. The princess, she went swimming, swimming, swimming. The princess, she went swimming on the river Nile. She found the baby Moses, Moses, Moses. She found the baby Moses on the river Nile. She took him to the palace, the palace, the palace. She took him to the palace on the river Nile. There the baby grew up, grew up, grew up. There the baby grew up on the river Nile. And he saved the Jewish people, people, people. He saved the Jewish people on the river Nile. Give yourself a round of applause. You did a great job. Thank you for singing and playing with me. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ruby, for sharing that awesome video with us.
Yeah, so up next, we're going to join Gavin in the recording booth.
Moses grew up in the house of a king. He lived in a place with every good thing. He made the king mad till he ran far away and left what he had. Moses tended to sheep until a certain day, when he saw the burning bush that did not burn away. He heard God speaking in a voice loud and clear, "Go down to Egypt and bring my people here." Moses went to Pharaoh, and this is what he said, "Let God's people go," but Pharaoh shook his head. "They all belong to me, and I will not let them go. Besides, I will not listen to a God I do not know." The Lord said to Moses, "Listen to my plan. When I am through with Pharaoh, he will be a different man. I'll fill the land with locusts and pesky frogs and flies, but he still will not let them go, for he isn't very wise. So I'll send more plagues till the king agrees that the Israelites can go and do as they please." Pharaoh wasn't happy with all that God had planned. At least he told the Israelites they could go out of his land. But just as they were leaving, Pharaoh changed his mind. He chased them with the soldiers, which wasn't very kind. God said, "Listen, and you can trust me." So he blazed a path through the sea. When the soldiers tried to follow, they fell into the sea, and then the people shouted, "God has set us free!"
Thank you, Gavin, for that Bible story recap. You can never hear the Bible too many times.
Well, let's head over to the science lab to see what Mason is up to.
Hello, my name is Mason. Welcome to the Science Lab. Today we have a fun experiment to remind us of the miracle God did through Moses. God used Moses to perform lots of miracles. The miracle we are going to remember today is God used Moses to separate the Red Sea so that God's people could walk across it on dry ground. For our experiment, we need clean water, a jar or a plastic bottle, vegetable oil, and some food coloring. Step 1. Fill the jar about halfway full with the water. Step 2. Add 2 drops of food coloring. Step 3. Put on the lid tight. Then shake. The water will turn to the color of the food coloring. Step 4. Take the vegetable oil and fill it up to make a thick layer. Step 5. Screw the lid back on tightly. Step 6. Shake the bottle. Last step. Let your jar sit for a minute. The water and oil should separate, just like Moses separated the Red Sea. Wow, isn't that cool? You should try this at home. Make sure you send me a picture or a video on Spring Hills Church Kids Corner Facebook group. I want to see how yours turned out. Thanks for joining me in the Science Lab. Now let's go learn the Bible verse. Our Bible verse today is Exodus 14:13. It says, "Don't be afraid, stand firm. You will see how the Lord will save you today." Let's use motions to help us learn. Don't be afraid. We're going to cross our arms like this. Stand firm, 2 arms up and stomp. You will see. We're going to put our hand over our eyes like we're looking out. How the Lord will save you today. We're going to put a big cross with your arms. Let's do it again. Don't be afraid. Stand firm. You will see how the Lord will save you today. Let's do it again. Don't be afraid. Stand firm. You will see how the Lord will save you today. Let's do it again. Don't be afraid. Stand firm. You will see how the Lord will save you today. Hudson, are you ready to do it by yourself?
Yeah! Exodus down to 14 and 13. Don't be afraid. Stand firm. You will see the Lord will save you today. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Mason and Hudson, for sharing today's Bible verse.
Our Bible verse today reminds us to stand firm in scary times because God is there with us.
I think after seeing God perform all of those incredible miracles, the Israelites would be very faithful and obedient to God.
Well, sadly, that's not exactly true. But you'll have to return next week to hear about what they did.
Well, it's time to test what you know. Let's start the quiz.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's program. To find additional resources for today's lesson, visit the Spring Hills Church Kids Corner Facebook group.
We love to hear from you, so please let us know how you're doing, and we are trusting and asking God to bless you at home.
Thanks for joining us in the Kids Corner for Channel 1 News.
Your one and only news source.
Hey, Martin, downtown, I want to say happy birthday to Aniston, Arabella, and Corbin. Happy birthday! Isla, Colton, and Lauren, happy birthday! Matt, Vivian, and Lucy, happy birthday! Sydney, Harper, and Olivia, happy birthday! Alexander, London, and Mara, happy birthday! Ava, Gianna, and Holden, happy birthday! Sailor, Harper, and Carson, happy birthday! Atticus, Marin, and Morgan, happy birthday! Christopher, Nathaniel, and Drew, happy birthday! Morgan, Kendricks, and Kit, happy birthday! Caleb, Maya, and Luca, happy birthday! Evangeline, Dante, and Caleb, happy birthday! Ella, Olivia, and Ava, happy birthday! Now last but certainly not least, my amazing little brother, Mason. Happy birthday! And I hope you all have a great birthday. We know that God has great plans for you. Booyah!
Happy